Hey, you're out in the garage with TheEZGZ. I just wanted to make a video. I swapped out my tie rods and I ran into a little situation, and I thought it would be worth making a video on this in case it happens to somebody else. You might be building a car, you might have the experience to know how to mix and match things. You might forget over time, like I did when I built this car many years ago, over 15 years ago. And so this video is going to be about tie rods, tie rod ends, and steering dampers. This car did not have a steering damper on it, and I've been driving a lot around town on the street, and it's a very light car, has a light front end on it, and I have a small steering wheel on it. And what I've found that the streets that I drive on are in such disrepair. A lot of times I have the potholes and manhole covers memorized, but still sometimes I get caught off guard, and I'll just be sailing along with one hand and hit one of those manhole cover holes. Man, they repave the streets and they just don't bring the manhole covers up, and ka-wham! It snaps that steering wheel. So I wanted to put a steering damper on it, but I didn't have a tie rod end that the steering damper would attach to up there by the box. Now that steering arm by the box came off a car that had a ball joint front end, and this car has a link pin front end. So what I've done is taken a ball joint tie rod end and put it in the steering arm. A link pin one would go down there, but you'd never get it to tighten all the way. It would be unsafe. You'd have built-in play. If you have an older car with a lot of wear on it, the tie rod ends, the ball joints, and link pins and king pins, all that sort of stuff starts getting sloppy. You start getting that shimmy if your wheels aren't balanced real good. Nowadays they make tires better and better, and they're not as far out of balance, but it can be a problem. So let's take a look at what was on here originally. Originally were these really heavy-duty aluminum ones, and they don't have provision for the steering damper, and this piece of tubing is longer than, here's a stock tube. You can see you can see that they're exactly the same length. Well, that example, that was aftermarket. Let's see what happens here. Okay, this chrome was also made for aftermarket. I have screwed this in there and you can see the misfit. Cancel out what I just said. Anyhow, you can buy tie rods with the steering damper or without. And you know, nowadays the way they have things available and the competition on the price of this stuff, you can buy a complete assembled tie rod assembly chrome for less money than if you were to buy like say one German tie rod end. And the rubber on all of this stuff that they make nowadays, it just doesn't last. You start getting these cracks in here. And all of these, when they come shipped to you, assembled and shipped to you, they're going to be dry. And so what I recommend is that you get a needle, a grease injector needle for your grease gun, and you stick it right up inside here and you give it a couple of squirts. If you have a car that you bought and you're thinking, uh-oh, I didn't do that and I just put it together, this will poke through the rubber and allow you to inject it in there. If you overfill it, it's not going to make your boot tear. What it's going to do is it's just going to squirt out. And if you have disc brakes, you want to be careful that you move it back and forth and let that grease come out, wipe it off, and make sure it doesn't get on your disc brakes. Drum brakes, they're a little bit easier. They're out of the way. It isn't as much of a problem, but it is a caution. At one time on a sand car, I made my own tie rods and I used heim joints. I was trying to save weight, but I bent the heim joint here. You can see that got bent, and there's all kinds of issues that can come up. Now there's two different sizes of tie rod and tapers. The ball joint that was from 67 on has a larger taper than the link pin. 66, I'm not sure. It's an oddball year. You can't even get replacement tie rod setups for the 66 that I'm aware of. Maybe somebody's got one, but I don't know, and I don't care. That's not what this video is about. So I would say another comment is that most cars out there that have a lot of miles on it, the steering damper is wore out, and you can definitely feel, and it's a little safer when you have a new steering damper. So they cost they're in the $30 range for, it's like a small light duty shock absorber is what it is. It made a huge difference with these aftermarket setup and heavy duty sway bar and all that I have on the Baja. I put a new steering damper, and I did notice a more pleasant ride and feel with it. So I put it on my lightweight dune buggy, and it just seems that as I take a lot of the performance stuff off, I've pretty much gutted this thing from performance and heavy duty off-road use, and it rides so much more comfortably in town. Worn out shock absorbers, or at the very most impy type shock absorbers. I have impy disc brakes on all four corners, and it's over brake. That was a dumb move. I should have just kept it with the drum brakes, but at the time I couldn't find the replacement drum that I wanted for it, and these brakes are 11-pound heavier per wheel than the drum brakes, and you're way over brake. So people complain that my brake light doesn't come on, and it's because I just touch it. And I've put 3 different brake light switches on this, including brand new ones, and it definitely comes on. But you don't, that's how over brake this thing is. And this could be a reason why I have squealing problems, is because I'm just kind of like barely putting it. I've tried the 2-stage master cylinder, the single-stage master cylinder, the larger bore impy master cylinder that's designed for this setup, and I don't want to get too much off topic because I wanted to focus this video on the tie rods and tie rod ends. So to review that, you've got basically 2 different styles of tie rods. I ran into a situation, and you might too if you bought a car from somebody else. These cars are 50 years old. Who knows what's been done to them. But a ball joint tie rod end won't even go in a link pin. You won't be able to get the nut in very far. However, a link pin is smaller, and it will drop right into a ball joint hole, and you might be able to get the nut on, but you don't want to drive it that way. It's got slop, it's unsafe, and you want to make sure that this stuff is done right, and it'll be more comfortable to drive, and a lot safer for you and everybody around you. So I just wanted to point that out. This car had it mixed. It had a ball joint style pitman arm on the steering box and the standard link pin on the link pin front end on the outers. So the threads are the same. You can put a ball joint on one side. Now, with these tie rods, you'll note that there's left-hand thread and right-hand thread. Now, you always want to run, you'll either have a sleeve that locks this down, and you want to tighten that. And on the other side, you want to make sure that there's a nut. You may get in a situation where you have one with no nut, or replace, you might lose it, or put a new end in it. You might booger it up, taking it off. But you want to make sure that you have a nut and that you use that. The reason they have left and right hand threads is so that when you mount it, when you turn this sleeve, it either spreads the wheels apart or brings them closer together so you can set your toe in on your front end alignment. That's why they have it that way, and it can be frustrating. Now, the ones with the dampers appear to always be left-hand thread. And so it tells me you want the left-hand thread side closest to the steering box, and you want the right-hand thread side closest to the wheel. You can switch that around, they'll still fit, they'll still work, but that's what's going on here, and you want to make sure that you always have this lock nut tightened down, because these threads will wear out moving back and forth, just driving down the road. You want to put pressure on that, tighten this thing down, and make sure that it's tight. It keeps this from turning and changing your adjustment, just like this side here, but it also makes these, it makes it safer. Okay? So, I think I've pretty much covered it, and you've got the grease needle here. You can grease them. There's a lot of different options and a lot of things that could have happened in your application, and so this may be enlightening to some. It may totally confuse others, and so I hope it's helped somebody out there. And as far as the types of grease, I don't care what kind of grease you put in there. I've used them all. It doesn't make any difference. The lighter stuff like the lithium type greases will lubriplate. This is cartridges got lubriplated. You can tell by the white color. That's a little thin, and I suppose on a hot day when you're sitting on the tarmac, it may get a little light, it may get messy. All these things attract dirt. You go to a car wash and use a pressure washer, you can cut these darn boots if you spend too much time with some of them, so just be careful of that. You can get aftermarket boots. The assortment packs usually have like 4 different sizes in them, and doggone it, you need 2 of the same size, and so you're going to buy a package and only use 1 out of it, and the red urethane will work, but it's not a perfect type fit like these that come from the factory on it. Here's one that looks to be in pretty good shape, and the end of it looks like it got wore out and tore a perfect circle in there. So that may compress down on the other portion of it, and the dirt might stay out, but I don't know. Let's see if I can give you a close-up of here's an example, a close-up example. I don't know if the camera shows it, but the ball joint here, it's got a larger diameter and a bigger taper, and it's stronger than this link pin over here. But nothing really to worry about. It's not worth trying to put something bigger in a on your car. It just, if you run into problems and are scratching your head and saying, I bought the right one and it doesn't fit, well, somebody may have changed that steering arm. Now this steering box and arm originally came off a car that had a ball joint front end, like this one over here. This is the ball joint type front end. And so when I got put on this one, I put ball joint on the outside and link pin on the inside. And it turns out that the sand car that I bought a couple years ago had a similar setup, except it was, I think it was link pin on the steering arm and ball joint on the outer. So there you have it, you know, strange stuff. So, and this one I think is correct. It's just all ball joint. Okay? So, hope you get your problems figured out. Hope this information helps somebody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subbing. TheEZGZ out!